When you start a land policy process, you need to make sure that you are building consensus on the key land issues which need to be addressed. Remember, Module 2 has been discussing key land issues in Africa. It was, in fact, about deciding what are the key land issues which need to be addressed by the policy document. So it's important to have a clear identification of the key and priority land issues in the country. This can be done through, remember, conducting studies, using research results, gathering data, conducting field trips, and others. Remember that we discussed all this during Module 2. Sometimes a team of independent experts are selected to conduct the land policy process, or an agreement can be arranged with a research institution. It's important to also take into consideration the country regional specificities. Most African countries are very diverse. For example, you have an area which is specifically used for pastoral development, other areas which are more touristic and parks and reserves, and other part of the country which is rather focused on farming and others. So it's really important to take into consideration the different regional specificities within the same country. And one best practice regarding this is about the development of thematic map, which combine the agricultural and ecological data with the key land issues and challenges in the country. So this gives a kind of easy to understand map about what are the major regional specificities within a country and what are the key issues which need to be addressed in specific regions. How can we facilitate the emergence of a national consensus on key land issues? Some experiences show that it's possible to clarify specific stakeholder interests. You have a diversity of stakeholders. You have farmers, you have private sector, you have pastoralists, you have whatever other stakeholders. So it's important that you give space to the different stakeholders to express clearly and frankly their specific interest. Based on that, you have also to organize the negotiation between stakeholders. What are you negotiating? You are negotiating the minimum consensus among stakeholders. And this can be done in multi-stakeholder fora. So you start with the specific stakeholder interest in stakeholder meetings, workshops, and so on. Then you bring all those stakeholders to see what is the minimum consensus we can agree today as a nation. So each stakeholder will have to make minimum consensus in order to reach the national consensus on the land issue. Best practice include using professional stakeholders which are emanating from the stakeholder group considered. For example, you are having a meeting or a workshop of the traditional leaders group. It's good to hire a professional facilitator which is emanating from this group. It can be another traditional leader, for example, or somebody who is working with the traditional leaders, who is used to their own language and their concerns and others. So the facilitator needs to really know very well the group with whom he's working. If you are having a farmers organization, a farmers workshop, it's good to identify somebody who knows the farmer group very well, or even identify a facilitator who is also a farmer. This exists today. So it should be something you need to keep in mind. If you don't find somebody directly which is a farmer, you can just identify an expert who is working usually with the farmers and who is trusted by the farmers. Another interesting practice is about pre-workshops, meaning that you facilitate kind of information and learning event with those stakeholders who need specific help, which are usually the vulnerable groups. If you take, for example, the women group and bring them to a national forum, they might not be, the rural women, for example, they might not be able to articulate their own concerns in front of people who are used to those forums, who has expertise on some issues and so on. So bringing them to a specific event where they will be informed on what is at stake, what are the key orientations of the draft land policy, for example, and what are their views, that they will be prepared, have clear ideas before joining a larger event. That's what is sometimes called pre-workshop, a workshop before the workshop. When you have the different policy dialogue events, it's important to document and disseminate the different the outcomes of the different policy dialogue events. A best practice is to prepare a white paper in order to inform the land policy dialogue, meaning that you need to have a kind of clear and simple document that will be shared before the key consultation events, so that people have a reference document in order to guide their own discussion, not just coming and say, okay, what do we think now? No, you need to give a kind of background, clear, simple document so that people can be guided in the discussion. The drafting process of the land policy document is a very important step. Land policy is a tool to guide land-related public interventions. So the land policy document needs to be contextualized. It's a land policy document for such specific country. It's not a general land policy document. So what are the key characteristics, key issues of this country? The policy document has to be articulated with the key development objectives and strategies. The land policy document is not an isolated document. It's a document which will be serving the development objectives. So it needs to be articulated with the development objectives and development strategies. The document needs to be a very clear and well-articulated document, meaning a document which is easily accessible by a diverse audience. It should be accessible by decision makers. It should be accessible by farmers, by women, by CSOs and others. It should not be a technical document just for experts. So it's a challenge because usually experts are not very well equipped to give a message which is addressing different audiences. So, but it's very important to have a document which is as clear as possible and very well articulated. It shouldn't be a lengthy document. Today, I think that we all know that we are over-informed. We have too many things to read. And if you are targeting decision makers, don't give them a document, a policy document, which is, I don't know, 300 pages. That's not possible. Nobody will read it. No ministry will read it. No, only those preparing maybe a thesis, a PhD thesis might be interested in reading your document. That's not the objective. So it should be it shouldn't be a lengthy, too big document. You also need a continuous participatory process. From the beginning of the land policy process to the end, participation is critical. The initial draft prepared need to be shared in order to inform the discussion. You need to have regional and national consultations within the country, not only national fora, but you need also to have consultations on the ground. Usually people organize regional consultations before going to the national consultation. As we said previously, you need to ensure clear participation and inputs from all concerned sectoral ministries. As people are providing feedback to the land policy document, you need to also have several versions, draft 1, draft 2, which will incorporate the inputs so that people see that, yes, their inputs are being taken into consideration. So the document will have so many versions which show that their views are being taken into consideration. A best practice is about creating a website, a specific website dedicated to the land policy process. So the different versions of the land policy can be posted and people can provide their feedback. They can discuss any issue. You can create a forum where people will just provide their views on the land policy process. So it's a good tool to be used. Let me give you a sample structure of a land policy document. I just decided to choose the Kenya land policy document. The document has a foreword where you'll have a message from a prominent person, for example, from the Minister of Land. It will have an executive summary. The chapter 1 of the Kenya land policy document is providing background information. The chapter 2 is discussing the land question in Kenya. The chapter 3 focuses on the land policy framework, meaning the key principles which are articulated by this document. The chapter 4 is about the institutional framework, and the chapter 5 is the land policy implementation framework. So interesting to note that in the land policy document itself, the land policy implementation issues are already being discussed. That's a very good and best practice. Something that those who are engaged in land policy development are not considering well, but which is very important, is the need to specifically follow up the adoption process. If you want the land policy document to be adopted in a timely manner, not being too delayed too much among other political or administrative agendas of the government, you really need to have a strategy to follow up the adoption process. Very important to clearly map the adoption process from the beginning to the end. Where is the document going from the beginning to the end of the adoption process? You need to have clarity on the type of adoption instrument. Is the document adopted by law, by decree, or any other instrument? So very important to understand this from the beginning, because this will determine where you need to advocate, for example. You need to clarify the adoption procedure step by step. For example, you need to understand that the document will first go, once finalized, it has to go to the review by the government. After the government, it has to go to, I don't know, such other instance. For example, if it's tabled for parliament, you need to know that it goes to a specific commission within the parliament and so on. So step by step, please clarify the adoption procedure and map all institutions involved, because you need to talk to advocate with such institutions in order to facilitate the process. Sometimes you need to facilitate the process through preparing a set of tools such as policy briefs, specific notes on demand, or just by your own initiative. You need to have a kind of advocacy campaign targeting decision makers. For example, targeting parliamentarians, targeting land administration agencies, targeting also development partners and others. A best practice is about government seminars, which are convened to review and endorse the draft land policy. This is a very interesting tool, and if well prepared, it can result in endorsement of the document, and also political will to contribute to the implementation of the document. Again, communication. Communication is really key to the land policy process. Once the land policy is adopted, it's important to take the lead in communication. A popular saying says that nature abhors vacuum. In French, we say that la nature a horreur du vide, meaning that if you don't occupy the communication space, others will just rush and give the bad message about the land policy process. So it's good to start immediately providing information to the different audiences about the new land policy. For example, interesting to have briefing sessions for journalists, because the journalists are the ones who will amplify the message about the new land policy. The best practice is about selecting champions for the land policy. Champions who can be people that people trust, that people listen to, and who have access to the diversity of audiences, access to the government, access to investors, access to farmers and others. So yeah, it's really about the communication strategy in support of the land policy process. So this is the land policy development segment of the process. You know that you can see that it's really a very challenging and difficult process. But let's move now to the land policy implementation process. Discussing the land policy implementation is very important because a land policy by itself doesn't mean, I would say, it doesn't mean anything. It can't impact on the livelihood of the people, on the economic development, unless it is implemented. So the land policy is a document. It will impact on the development of the country, on the livelihood of the people, if and only if it is implemented. What we can notice as a starting point is that across the continent, there is a very poor level of implementation of land policies. Even when a country has been acknowledged as having developed a very good, very innovative, very pro-poor land policy, sometimes you will just notice that after 5 or 10 years, nothing significant happened on the ground. So very poor level of implementation across the continent. So it's important to understand why that. From different studies, reflections, and fora, it appeared that one fundamental reason is that most countries will make efforts to develop a land policy, will put a lot of money in developing the land policy, but they don't develop an implementation strategy to guide the implementation process. Therefore, the implementation process is left to narrow technical circles, the land administration circles, for example, without involving the other stakeholders who participated in the land policy development itself. Meaning that the land policy implementation strategy, even when developed, sometimes is not submitted to public debate. People will be considered as eligible to participate in the land policy development process. But when it comes to implementation, they will just think, oh no, this is the technical part, it's the business for land administration agencies. No, the participation should be continuous throughout the whole process. Another element is that there is no costing, appropriate costing of the implementation process. How would cost the implementation of the drafted policy? If you don't cost, you'll just be surprised that you don't have the needed resources. You also need to develop a resource mobilization strategy. If you don't have a resource mobilization strategy, you'll get your land policy developed and adopted after 2 or 3 years effort, and then you realize that you don't have adequate resources to implement. So it's important from the beginning to start costing and having a resource mobilization strategy. Another important reason which has been identified is that there is poor budgetary allocation of governments to the land reform itself. Meaning that there is heavy dependency of African countries on donor funds. If you depend on donor funds only for implementing your land policy, you might not be successful in mobilizing such resources, needed resources, if donors consider that the land reform is not a priority for their interventions. So it's really important to have budgetary allocation to the land reform process. And also, if you need to lead your own land reform, you cannot rely on donor funds only. A very important dimension to be considered, to be discussed, is about the time frame of the land reform. In most cases, as countries depend on donor funds, the land policy is really envisaged in a short-term perspective based on the donor funding cycle. We all know that donor projects are usually tabled for, let's say, 3 to 5 years, short-term, while we know that implementing a land policy is a long-term process. So it's a kind of conflict between the reality of the time needed for implementing land policy and the donor funding cycle, project cycles. Another aspect about time is about the fact that most implementation are done through pilots only. The pilots are very useful, but most donors, for example, will just fund the pilot phase and will not continue based on the outcome of the pilot process. So countries will benefit support for a pilot phase, and then nothing else happens for the continuation of the implementation process. Another impediment to the land policy implementation is the defects in the land policy itself. If your land policy is not realistic, for example, it will result in some provisions of the land policy not being implementable, not just being implementable, or the population for which the land policy is developed resisting to the policy itself. So it's the defects in the land policy itself which can lead to difficulties in the implementation process. There is also inadequacy of implementation infrastructure, which can cause difficulties in the implementation process of the land policy. Such inadequacy can be about the human, financial, and technical resources, or sometimes the high turnover of government agents in charge of implementation. We all know that in most cases, government agents don't stay long in the same positions, and they will just move to better positions and leave, for example, the land policy process for which they were trained. That can happen. Another aspect of the difficulty to implement the land policy is about the weak capacity to manage change. Remember that we said that the land reform is about change in the way land is owned, managed, used, and others. So if you don't have the needed capacity to manage change in a long-term process, it will be difficult to really sustain and be successful in the change you are trying to bring in the land sector. You also need to understand that any change will call powerful interests into question. Therefore, it will generate resistance. If some powerful interests are losing in the change process, they will just resist. So resistance is part of the difficulty in any land reform. And finally, we also need to understand that in most cases, the existing institutions in charge of implementing the land reform, meaning in charge of bringing and managing the change, are the key obstacles to the change itself. They will just resist to the change because they don't want to change their habits or they are losing some privileges and others. So it really makes the change environment very difficult and very complex in most African countries. I can't underestimate the interinstitutional conflicts over the leadership of land reforms. In most countries, you have institutional conflicts around who has to lead the land reform. This results from unclear definition of competencies and responsibilities among different ministries, or from uncoordinated initiatives and interventions in the land sector. And usually, poor political will leads to lack of arbitration of interinstitutional competition. So if there is nobody to say, okay, there is competition, but this is the way the government has decided that we should go. If you don't have kind of arbitration competency at higher level, you'll always have continuous interinstitutional conflicts between different ministries in the leadership of the land reform. Now, what are some of the appropriate strategies for effective land policy implementation? We already said that land policies will not impact on the people unless they are implemented. Let's take the example of the Uganda land policy document. From this document, the objective of the Uganda land policy is to stimulate the contribution of the land sector to the overall socio-economic development, wealth creation, and poverty reduction. That's the objective. But do we think that this will be achieved just from the statement of the policy? No. It will happen only through the implementation of the policy itself. So implementing the land policy is about transforming the land policy into a land reform. That's really key to understand. We already also mentioned that it's so important to design an implementation plan. What is the implementation plan? What is the content? The implementation plan needs to tell the government what needs to be done, how can it be done, when should it be done, and other issues. The implementation plan should also address the cost estimate of the implementation process and also give indication on how and where to mobilize resources. Remember that we said that it's very important that the government provide budgetary allocation to the land reform, but also it's important to mobilize additional resources from partners, donors, and other institutions. It's very important to ensure high-level political commitment and continuous public engagement in the land reform process. You know, it's really important to understand that the participation, the public engagement is not just for the land policy development process. It has to continue throughout the implementation process. So we need political commitment at highest level, and we also need continuous engagement of the public if land policies have to be implemented effectively. Another aspect to ensure the effective land policy implementation is about ensuring the timely development of the legislative, regulatory, and institutional framework of the land reform. Remember that the land policy is articulating a set of principles. So you will not implement principles on the ground. What you will implement on the ground is the legislative and regulatory framework. Let me give you one thing I consider as a best practice. It's from Burkina, where the parliament requires that any draft law should be accompanied by the draft regulation documents before the parliament agrees to examine the law. So let me repeat and make it clear. In Burkina, the parliament required that the draft laws, any draft law, including draft land laws, are accompanied by the draft regulations before the parliament agrees to examine the text. This because they just noticed that in most cases a law is developed, but the regulations, implementation regulations are not drafted timely, meaning that you'll just have a law which cannot be implemented on the ground. So I would consider that this is a best practice to be shared. Capacity development is critical to effective land policy implementation. It's very important to really avail continuous learning opportunities, specifically to the land administration agents. Most agents have been trained in a specific manner, bringing them to have specific habits. And when you bring change and that they are not trained on what needs to be changed, they will just continue business as usual. So providing continuous learning opportunities is critical if land policies have to be implemented effectively. It's also important to promote initial learning processes on land policy and land governance. That's what the NELGA network is trying to do through developing specific land governance curricula at the university levels. At the same time, it's also important to provide opportunities for learning to agents working at grassroots level. Land policies are implemented at different levels, at national level, at a medium, intermediate level, and also at grassroots level. You have agents at all those levels, and specific programs need to be targeting all those different levels of agents. And finally, it's important to develop timely an evaluation system, including developing indicators, gathering baseline data in time, and leading to better understanding of progress made and failures for timely readjustment. So, thinking of the evaluation, timely is very important to ensure the effectiveness of the land policy implementation process. Let me give you an example of a land policy implementation plan, which I borrowed from the Uganda land policy. process. This is the structure. You can see that you have 12 elements in the implementation plan. 1, administrative measures needed for coordinated national land policy implementation. 2, capacity building and training programs for government, the private sector, civil society, and other key stakeholders. 3, protection and promotion of women's secure rights and access to land. 4, land disputes and land conflicts resolution program. 5, institutional reform and land service delivery program. 6, land tenure regularization and securing of land rights. 7, legal and regulatory program. 8, research and studies program. 9, policy reform program. 10, land rights civic education and public awareness. 11, fulfilling regional and international obligations. 12, land use and land management reform. So this is the structure of the Uganda Land Policy Implementation Plan. We could have taken other implementation plan like the Tanzania Land Policy Implementation Plan and so on. Most important is to understand that each country will have its specific land policy implementation plan.